politics, business, sports, arts, music. Mike and Marty on the beat. Mike and Marty. Mike and Marty.
Good morning, Bellows Falls and Keene, and welcome to the feed. It's Mike and Marty. Here we are on December 13th, cruising down to Christmas, getting there. Today we're going to be talking about sleep coaching with Jennifer Frey, and this is one of our Sojourns highlights. But first, Marty, with local events.
So first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone that volunteered and the organizers. I know it's only like 4 people, and I don't want to miss anyone's name, so they know who they are, of the Parade of Lights that happened on Saturday night, because it was an amazing community event. The downtown was packed. I'm assuming the streets in town, for the whole parade route were packed. Amazing. We lucked out with great weather. The people that did the floats, it was be hard to choose the winner. I know they're voting right now.
Check on Facebook because they're voting for the leads. Yeah, it was 65 floats. This is rivaling Alumni Parade now. And the number of people that were downtown and all the action that was happening everywhere, pretty cool.
It's a great way to kick off the holidays. Yeah. So the Opera House, we have a lot of interesting things happening at the Opera House for the next few days. This Friday, there won't be any movie, but there's a Liberty Food Fest. It's a celebration of local food, and it appears, it was a little confusing, it appears it is open and you can go to it, but you have to buy tickets through the actual presenter.
Okay.
And it says that actually on the Bellows Falls Opera House website. And then starting on Sunday, the Opera House is going to start having some holiday classics. So on Sunday at 3 p.m., they will be showing the iconic holiday classic Elf. Love that one. Then on Sunday also, but at 6 o'clock, they're going to be showing Jack Frost. On Monday at 7 p.m., it's Christmas with the Cranks. On Tuesday at 7 p.m., and this was a theme of many of at least one of the floats that came through, Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Got to see that every year. This is classic. And then the actual classic movie, the classic movie this week on Wednesday is It's a Wonderful Life, and it's sponsored by Coda and Coda. Happening on Saturday night at the Bellows Falls Opera House is a Raise the Roof Next Stage collaboration. It's Livingston Taylor and Carla Bonoff with Home for the Holidays. And tickets, they keep posting on Facebook the seating chart. Tickets are still available, but it's starting to get pretty full. I mean, I find in the Opera House that pretty much no matter where you sit, there's a good seat. But you do want to, if you have a particular seat you want to sit in, you might want to get your ticket. And then this Friday is a multitude of things happening in the square. Last Friday was Fun Friday and Ladies Night, and this Friday is Fun Friday. It's Third Friday, or 3FBF, as people like to call it, and it's Men's Night. So because it's 3FBF, there will be open studios, and so the galleries and the Canal Street Art will be open. I'm going to guess Chris Sherwin will probably have his open studio. He also usually participates in Men's Night and maybe has some libations.
Yes.
Maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm not going to confirm or deny, but there will be at least some food at a lot of the places for Men's Night this Friday night in downtown Bellows Falls.
Yeah. One other shout out, you're being modest. What about the Bellows Follies?
Oh, the Bellows Follies. Right.
She killed it as a reindeer.
Yes, we had a very successful Bellows Follies. A huge shout out to Wild Goose and everyone that performed. The songs brought me back to a lot of 80s movies, and that was very good. And yes, we as a Rotary group, and you were an elf.
I was.
You had a singing part. I just had a speaking part. We raised some money, which is nice. Hopefully everybody that came had a great time. And then the money that was raised will go back into the community.
Another good turnout. So let's move on to Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. You're coming to us from Newfane today. We're going to be talking about sleep coaching. And that's something that's really important this time of year, isn't it? With the change in our light and the length of day, doesn't sleep become an issue for a lot of people?
Yeah, it is actually a time of year when people start to sort of fall out of their usual routine. And I think sometimes what comes along with that is also the holidays are right after it. And so there's a lot of things that people are trying to get done and to organize and those kinds of things. And that can also interfere a little bit with our sleep patterns.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually an instructor, a yoga instructor, but I'm also a mindfulness instructor. So I teach meditation as well. And I came across the sleep coaching basically out of my own need and my own struggle with chronic insomnia. For years when I was a kid, I slept fine. Even into college, I slept fine. But then when I got into my 30s, I started to find that I was awake for several nights a week for months and then years. And sometimes it went away, but then it would also come back. And trying lots of different solutions and not really finding any, it took me a while, but I finally came to a place where I was recognizing the fact that so much of what was happening with my own insomnia had to do with what was happening in my mind. So I started to learn a little bit more about it.
And where does so can you kind of give a rundown on like what does sleep coaching mean? How does it work?
Yeah. So pretty much what it is people come to me who have issues with chronic insomnia. There's different levels of insomnia. We all have moments where we have a struggle with going to sleep, and it could just be that we have an early morning flight, or we've got a big weekend ahead of us and we're making plans. So nights here and there are okay. When it becomes an acute problem, and that's sometimes a problem that's from stress, we start to get into a kind of almost a routine or a rhythm of having a bad night's sleep. And then what happens from that point is it becomes more chronic. And so people who come to see me are generally people who have been struggling with chronic insomnia for a long time, months, years. They've tried everything and they're kind of at the end of their rope usually when they come to me. So sleep coaching is intended to really look at what the problem is that somebody might be having. I have them keep a log of what their sleep patterns are like. And then just by looking at their sleep patterns, I can generally tell what's happening with their overall difficulty with sleeping. So whether that's having trouble falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night, I can make modifications and create a structure for them that will help them sleep a little bit more soundly.
So do you have them log what they're doing? Like, is it like a whole journal log? Like, what are they doing during the day that leads to the, or do you just look at their sleep patterns?
Well, it's a little bit of everything, actually. I mean, a lot of what's happening when people have chronic insomnia is, like I said, it's created a habit. And sometimes there are behaviors during the day that they're not actually taking advantage of that would help their sleep pattern at night. So we think about sleep as only being something that happens between the hours of maybe 9 and 5 a.m. But actually what's happening all during the day is something that adds to what's known as our sleep drive. And it's that ability to get to the point of 9 o'clock at night and feeling like, oh yeah, I'm really sleepy and I'm ready to go to bed, and for the body to surrender into that sleep. So if we're not staying active, and I don't necessarily even mean just exercising, but if you're not like, doing chores around the house or, getting yourself to go out with friends that night, even though you might not have slept well the night before, if you're not kind of creating this energy and exhausting yourself during the day, it will have an impact on how you're sleeping at night. So we do look at some of the stuff in terms of what they're doing during the day. But then I also like for them to tell me, what time did you get into bed? What time do you think you fell asleep? Did you wake up in the middle of the night? When you woke up in the middle of the night, how long do you think you were awake? And then I like to know, when did you wake up in the morning and when did you get out of bed? And one of the more important things is that I want to know what their mind is thinking when they are awake, because oftentimes we create an anxiety around the idea of having insomnia, which just makes the insomnia worse.
So it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I didn't sleep good last night. I'm really tired and I really need to get to sleep, but I didn't sleep good last night, so I'm not going to sleep good. How does screen time play into what you see for chronic insomnia?
Yeah. So I think that sometimes screen time is is not necessarily it's not going to be the only issue that's happening. Some people, I think, if they're awake in the middle of the night and they're looking at their phone and there's this very close proximity to that blue light, then that is something that's going to potentially create more issues as they try to go back to sleep. Blue light is the light that we generally have in the mornings. And I recommend to people that have chronic insomnia that they try to get that blue light, meaning that natural light, as early as possible, because that will start sort of the clock of their full cycle of sleep. Meaning, as soon as they can wake up, those photoreceptors in their eyes, the sooner their day starts, and that means that they'll potentially come to a closer end of their day at an earlier time of day. So for the screen time, I generally say that you can be on your screen. If you want to watch TV, that's okay. You just might not necessarily have it right in front of your face when you're watching it. Or you might wear like the yellow glasses. And nowadays, a lot of our phones and devices have the ability to turn down the blue light and increase more of that yellow afternoon dimming light that we look for.
So that's really interesting. You're saying that if you want to get a good night's sleep, you have to get up in the morning and get going.
Yeah, it's actually true. It's really funny.
Well, no, I never heard it expressed that way. It makes so much sense. It's just,
Yeah. And what we have is this within our body, we have this natural system of needing to do or, kind of participate in a certain amount of things to get all of our energy, to get our exercise, to feed ourselves, to work, to provide for our families. All of those things are expected to happen during the course of the day. And then by the end of the day, you should logically be ready for sleep. And I think for a little while, we got caught up into a culture of thinking that sleep was like, sleeping was like a lazy thing to do, or, that you didn't need sleep, and that I was just going to power through it and, make more time for my day and and stretch it out more. But we really need sleep in order to be able to remember things, in order to be able to process things, in order for our bodies to be able to replenish and do whatever they need to do to kind of replace anything that maybe got worn out during the day. So I do think that it's important to pay attention to what we're doing during the day so that we can sleep much better at night. Another thing we don't tend to do is take time to process information. So if we think about babies or younger kids, they sleep a lot. And the reason they sleep a lot is because they have so much information coming at them. Their brains have to take the time to figure out oh, what was that? What was that? And as we get older, we don't necessarily need that much processing time. But with the introduction of technology and with devices, we don't always spend time just thinking and letting our mind wander. We are quick to sort of pick up our phones and maybe read an article when we're sitting in a waiting room in a doctor's office. Whereas, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, it might have been something where you just kind of looked around and, took in your environment, and also were able to process some of the things that might have happened earlier in your day, like the conversation you had with your cousin about something, or the work problem that you're trying to solve. So looking for opportunities to really spend those daytime hours effectively processing is something that we need more of.
Do you find, I know there's a lot of devices that people wear now that kind of gauge your sleep health or your sleep amount or how much deep sleep you've been in and when you fell asleep. Do you know, are those accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I've not studied them specifically, but a lot of the studies that I have read are kind of saying that those are not actually accurate representations. They're taking averages and they're just basically running them through an algorithm and getting a sense of what you're doing in the middle of the night. I mean, if you were to actually go for a sleep study, that would be something that would give you accurate information, because it really is actually tapping into the brain waves, what's happening within your mind, and also the other systems of the body, your heart rate and your blood pressure and things like that. But with those devices, they're really not getting an accurate representation of what's happening in your mind. And it really does have to do with kind of the brain waves. I don't think they're a terrible thing, but what I see oftentimes with people that I've worked with is that they're really reliant on them. So reliant on them that they have kind of lost their natural ability to actually know if they're sleeping well or not. They're almost relying too much on their devices to say that they slept badly last night.
That's funny.
You know, they look at it and say,
no, I said I slept good. I must have.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering about. Because I think if you don't sleep well, one of the things you sort of drift in and out of sleep. How do people journal that? Because it's like, oh, I don't know how much I slept last night because I was thinking I was asleep, but I was awake, and I was thinking I was awake, and I turned out I was asleep, and it can get very confusing.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because a lot of the times people don't actually recognize how well or not well they're sleeping. Sometimes people are thinking that they're sleeping really poorly, but they're actually sleeping okay. Sleep has a phase. So there are stages or phases to sleep. There's the very light sleep. There's that sort of dozing on the couch. Or the boring lecture, I like to say, in a warm room when you definitely feel yourself nodding off. We then shift into something that's a little bit called light sleep, and it's something that is actually when the body and the brain are starting to transition. Then there's deep sleep, there's REM sleep, and then there's also a wakeful state. So you could be in any number of those over the course of your night 4 or 5 times, maybe even 6 times, depending on how long you're in bed. So there are times where you are awake. You know, some of us get up in the middle of the night and have to go to the bathroom. Some nights we're able to do it and get right back to bed, and other nights, we're wide awake for some reason. And so that's just a natural pattern. So for the sleep log, I really just want to know when you think you've been sleeping and when you think you've been awake, but not so much the detail on like what phase you're in. Through the sleep log, I can actually look and see like, okay, it looks like you're spending a lot of time in bed, but you're not actually sleeping. And from that, I try to coach people to spend less time in bed to more closely match what it is that when they're actually sleeping. Because sometimes we get into that negative association with bed.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that you go through a number of cycles, and some of them might be awake cycle, or a little bit of an awake cycle, or maybe a light sleep. Because I know for a very long time, almost every single night, I would wake up, I'd look at my clock, it's 3 o'clock, say, oh, it's 3 o'clock, I can sleep more, and go right back to sleep. So that was just like a cyclical thing, a circular thing. It wasn't really a sleep disruption. It was more just that I was in those patterns. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. And it sounds like you might have had a pretty standard pattern where, at 3 a.m. for a while, you were waking up, and a lot of us experience that, where that just happens to be when the wakeful phase is coming around, and yours just happened to be happening at 3 a.m. And it woke you up enough that you were like, oh, what, kind of maybe confused about the time, looking over to your clock. It's great that you say, oh, it's 3 a.m. I've got more time to sleep. That's like what we want people to say. But a lot of the times people will look and say, oh, no, it's 3 a.m. I'm stuck being awake. So we want to sort of change that perception that people have.
I thought I had read, and it was sometime years ago maybe, that when that we should, this idea of an uninterrupted block of 8 hours of sleep is actually a modern invention. That before there were light bulbs and electricity, that people would go to sleep when it got dark and then wake up in the middle of the night and do stuff, and maybe have a meal, or do write, or do some sort of activity, and then go back to sleep and then get up in the morning. And have you heard that? Or
It's absolutely true that there were periods of time. I think that, like, if you look back at some literature written probably around like Victorian and Edwardian times, there are references to people actually getting up and almost like going out and seeing their neighbors, but that it wasn't uncommon for people to be up for 1 to 3 hours in the middle of the night and then going back to bed and sleeping for a little bit more in the morning. So it does lend itself to this idea that, we're not supposed to just fall asleep at 9 o'clock and wake up 8 hours later. We do, in fact, have this cycle. that the body and the mind go through, and that's intentional. The brain can't and shouldn't spend all of its time in its deep sleep. That would be actually something that would be more of like a sleeping disorder. We need for there to be this sort of phasing in and out. You know, the dream phase has a purpose, but then when that dream phase is over, we move back into that lighter sleep, and maybe that's when we wake up and notice the clock and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's absolutely true that historically we don't sleep necessarily that soundly, and that's pretty modern.
Yeah.
So what is, if you had to choose quality over quantity, which would you choose? Quality of sleep or quantity of sleep?
I think quality of sleep, for sure. Especially as we get older, our sleep patterns change. You know, we no longer need the sleep pattern that we needed when we were, 6 months old. Even when we're 17 or, in our teenage years, things change. And so I think it's important to think about the quality and not necessarily the quantity. I think people get too wrapped up in this idea that 8 hours of sleep is what we need, when actually the older you get, the less you need. And actually the less you need at night. Sometimes you just need a little cat nap in the afternoon. And that's something that can add to the quality of your sleep as well.
Huh. So actually napping in the afternoon can be a good thing?
It's totally acceptable.
Awesome. We are happy about that. That's good to hear. So we're down.
I will advise, though, that if you're going to take a nap, you don't take a nap for more than 20 or 30 minutes. Okay. Once you get into 45 minutes or an hour, that's when that full sleep cycle starts to happen. And when you get pulled into that deep sleep, and maybe you've experienced this, sometimes when you come out of your nap and you've come out of that deep sleep phase, you're kind of a little cranky. You might have a little bit of a headache. You might you might feel a little sluggish and not be able to kind of like get your day going again. Yeah. And so that's why I advise people to stick to like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And you'd be surprised. It's very restorative to only have that much time.
I can't confirm or deny.
Good. I like that. I'm taping that part.
I was going to say.
That's on a loop.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my husband would 100% agree with, should my naps be longer than 20 minutes, I might wake up a little, we use the term salty.
Salty, yes.
So we're down to just 3 minutes left, believe it or not. So if you could talk about how to get, you have two programs. You have the Get to Sleep program and the Foundation of Sleep. So if you could briefly just describe each, and then how people can contact you if they want to follow through on either of those programs.
Yeah, that's great. So Foundations of Sleep is a workshop that I run usually every other month, and that's intended to just kind of do this wide sweep of people who might be curious about their sleep patterns. So it could be people who have chronic insomnia, but it could also be people who are just like, my sleep is changing. What's up with that? So Foundations of Sleep, it's a 4-hour workshop, and basically we just go over the finer details, a lot of what I've mentioned here about what sleep is and what insomnia is and how to get a better relationship to your sleep. And then the Get to Sleep program is something that I offer to people perhaps after they've done the foundations, but you can also just do it on its own. And that's a 1-to-1 individual course that meets it's usually about 4 to 6 times over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. And that's where we're looking at the log and we're actually modifying and adjusting people's sleep behaviors and sleep patterns. And that's where it's just a little bit, by the time you're done with that 8 weeks, you're pretty much back to sleeping normally. Nice. And the way to get in touch with me for either of those would be to go to the website, which is villageyogavt.com. And there is right on the homepage a badge that says sleep coaching, and you can just click right on that. And that'll take you to a form where you can reach out to me. Or, as you guys have so nicely put, you could call or you could use my email address to just reach out to me and say, I've got sleep problems. I'd love to know more.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a very enjoyable, enlightening show.
And we didn't fall asleep.
And we didn't fall asleep, but we're prepared at any
I don't
moment.
know. Maybe I didn't do my job so well.
No, I feel so much better about the waking up at 3 a.m. though. I mean, that's because I always thought that was like I was having bad sleep. So I've definitely learned something.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Jennifer. I hope you have a wonderful holiday. And that's it for the feed. We'll see you next week.
Bye, community.
Local news, politics, business, sports, arts, music.